Mr. Chris Castanien, também diretamente do Texas, para nosso evento. Chris é gerente de serviços técnicos para as Américas, da NESTE, e também trabalhou na Lubrizol como gerente global para testes mecânicos e ligações com OEMs. É membro da SAE, ASTM e participa como membro líder de comitês do Instituto Americano do Petróleo, o API, e outras entidades também. Ele tem bacharelado em Engenharia de Controle de Sistemas pela Academia Naval dos Estados Unidos e MBA pelo Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Chris, seja muito bem-vindo e muito obrigado por estar mais uma vez aqui nos prestigiando. A palavra é toda sua.
Thank you, Pedro. It's really great to be here again. I do appreciate you inviting me to share my thoughts and insights with this important conference. Let me see if I can share my screen there. Do you have it?
Yes.
All right, great. I'm going to talk about what I call the future of motor oils, but I also want to talk, let me go to my agenda here. So here's today's agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about several topics. Pedro asked me to speak about general market trends, which is somewhat going to overlap with what Amanda gave because she did a tremendous job with all the detail. I'm going to talk a little bit on a higher level and give you a cute picture of a dog wagging its tail and stuff like that. I hope my simpler telling the story will be at least entertaining, if not as detailed. Then I'm going to talk about electric vehicles and the future of the internal combustion engine. EVs, as they're called, are of course driven by sustainability demands. So I'm going to finish the talk with a bit about how base stocks contribute to sustainability. And we'll even talk about some new technology that is enabling carbon neutral renewable base stocks. So as I said, I'm going to repeat Amanda's a little bit. I've got some different pictures, not nearly the detail, but the coronavirus, you can't start talking about what's happened with base oils until you talk about the coronavirus. It changed the way we work. It shut down the economies. It's cost millions of lives, and its impacts continue. And repeating what, or illustrating it slightly differently from what Amanda said, it may seem odd to start talking about air travel and to talk about engine oils, but there's a significant and long-lasting knock-on effect to the significant downturn in air travel. As the global economy locked down, air travel demand plunged. If you look carefully at the timeline on the left, it goes out to about 2050. Look more closely to about 2021, 2023. The EIA projects that it'll be several years before air travel demand regains its 2019 normal. Alternatives to air travel suddenly became better alternatives. Zoom, Teams, WebEx. We have to do conferences like this over the internet. And if you look on the right-hand side, you can see what this means for active passenger aircraft in the chart on the right. You see actually the one that's more interesting is the parked passenger aircraft. I like this cover from Bloomberg for an article. It says, here's what you do when 2/3 of the world's jets can't fly. Lots of the air fleet got parked as commercial jet traffic demand plummeted. And lacking places to store planes, some major airports just shut down runways and parked them on the tarmac. And as Amanda said, the refineries had to respond to these massive demand changes. The fuel demand drops in the summer of 2020, jet fuel drops 50%, gasoline dropped 25%, diesel was down 10%. The refineries had to respond. They try to redirect some of the jet fuel into the diesel pool. You can only do that so far before your volatility gets out of line. You try to reduce your operating rates. Amanda showed those operating rates. They're astonishing low. Some operating margins actually went negative for a period of time where you were actually losing money by running the refinery. As a result, many refineries went into turnarounds. They pulled them forward. That's further crimping supply because many refineries decided it was just better to shut down and we'll do our turnaround now. And some refineries just closed. And then, of course, what else could go wrong? We've had a global pandemic. Economic activity cratered, the refineries struggled, and unfortunately, as Amanda has hinted, Mother Nature was not very helpful either. So looking at the Louisiana hurricane season recap for 2020, there were 30 named storms last year. It's the most ever in history. 5 of them hit Louisiana. It's the first time that's ever happened to any state. And by the way, when they hit Louisiana, they barely missed Texas. If they'd been a little further west, it would have hit Houston, and the damage to the industry would have been even greater. The strongest was Laura, it did $10 billion in damage. Several refineries and petroleum processing facilities were forced to temporarily and repeatedly shut down, further reducing production of petrochemicals, fuels, and lubes. Then there's this. In mid-February, all of the southern USA was in the grip of a completely unanticipated sub-zero polar vortex. Much of the US Gulf Coast was without power and below freezing for 3 days. The polar storm shut down 42% of US total production capacity, and these were, as she said, emergency shutdowns. They resulted in further difficulties restoring the plants, and it's taking 2 to 3 months to get back online. Just to make sure it's not all the Gulf Coast. In March, of course, the Ever Given blocked 12% of the world's trade by getting stuck in the Suez Canal for almost a week. This spiked global oil prices with knock-on effects for weeks as the ports tried to clear backlogs. I'm going to finish my catastrophe report with this bright news. The 2021 Atlantic hurricane season storm numbers increased in the latest outlook. What you're looking at here is Hurricane Laura approaching landfall last August. You can see Louisiana just to the north over there and the Texas coast just to the west. The petrochemical and refining industry is all along the coast of Texas and Louisiana. As you can see, one large storm making impact in that area can really hurt the industry. I make this point for an important reason, which Amanda said. In a normal year, the refineries have already boosted production to fill their tanks in anticipation of a tough hurricane season. This year, the tanks are very low. We're increasing an abnormally high number of hurricanes, and an active hurricane season in the Gulf is likely to be more impactful than normal. Just to let you know, I have a personal stake in this. That's my house right there where the star just showed up. So I'm very concerned and interested in the hurricane season. These next couple slides, again, reflect kind of what Amanda has talked about. I showed you the refineries reduced production in response to the major demand reductions at the outset of COVID-19. So what happened to demand? This is globally now. This chart is from the International Energy Agency, and it shows the global demand cratering 16% in the second quarter of 2020. And it predicts a moderate pickup in demand as the crisis begins to fade away. The chart shows global demand down about 3% in the upcoming quarter. So we were down 16, now we're going to be down about 3%, meaning demand is coming back up. But planes are still on the ground, and that makes it tough for the refineries to get their economics right. This slide I'll kind of just blow through. Amanda went through this completely. Basically, it says prices are rising because of supply. And finally, I promised a dog wagging its tail. Base oil margins are always insufficient to drive the refinery. So even though base oil values are going up and up and up, the refinery just can't adjust to that because the base oil production is typically less than 2% of refinery output. Finishing up this section, base stock supplies are tight and volatile. The domestic leisure air travel is showing signs of recovery. International air travel and business travel remain depressed and are expected to remain depressed. The rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines varies greatly by country and region. In a normal year, base oil stocks are high going into the hurricane season. And it's going to be tough to predict base oil pricing and supply. You saw Amanda squirm. She had a tough one to try and explain that one. So this is the midpoint of this presentation. I promised to stop overlapping Amanda's presentation. Let's recount the situation regarding base stock availability. Let's take a look at the need for base oils in the future. There's people right now that are saying maybe we won't be needing base oils in the future. I'd like to talk a little bit about the future of the internal combustion engine and the need for engine oils. So Politicians, in response to activists, keep making these lofty statements of their ambition to reduce future greenhouse gas emissions. There's little downside to proclamations that require no action until after they leave office. So they make these promises. In February 2021, the UN Climate Change reported 75 countries comprising 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions have reported they will realize actual reductions of less than 1% improvement in 2030 production over 2010. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change suggests a decrease of 45% is needed to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, and 75 countries are going to manage 1%. Further, several countries have indicated they're going to outlaw internal combustion. I'll call it ICE several times. Internal combustion vehicles in 2030 to 2050. Almost none of them actually passed legislation to do so, but they're virtue signaling. There's been claims that electric vehicles will kill the internal combustion engine. This is a cover of The Economist from 2017. And as Mark Twain, a famous author in the United States, said, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. It seems so that this is likely with the claims that the electric vehicles are going to quickly dispatch the internal combustion engine. I want to start out by defining what is an electric vehicle. In its most inclusive usage, an electric vehicle has some portion of its propulsion augmented or controlled by an electric motor. So here you see a hybrid electric vehicle with an internal combustion engine, an electric motor and batteries. You see the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, again with a smaller internal combustion engine, a bigger motor, a bigger battery, and a plug. You see a battery electric vehicle, which has no internal combustion engine. In reality, the majority of today's electric vehicles include an internal combustion engine. Hybrids, whether they are mild, start-stop, full hybrids, or plug-in or electric hybrid, all electric hybrids, all have an internal combustion engine. Only BEVs are fully electric without an internal combustion engine. So let's take a closer look at the electric vehicle penetration, and specifically, let's look at battery electric vehicle penetration. First, I'm going to show you US data. Here you see the annual light-duty vehicle sales on the left axis. In recent years, before the pandemic, total sales have been around 15 to 16 million vehicles per year. As we move forward into the late 2020s, we see there'll likely be a slight reduction in total annual sales. But the point I want you to look at is the red portion, the part representing battery electric vehicles. Moving out to 2050, BEVs represent approximately 1.5 million new vehicle sales out of 15 million total sales. That's around 13.5 million new internal combustion engines a year being brought to market. If we want to look at the global situation, the situation is similar. Here we see Klein's predictions for the car park of 5 leading nations. And 2020 is represented in the inner circle in the upper right plot, and 2040 in the outer circle in the lower right plot. You see the claim, which is correct, that EVs will represent 35% of the 2040 passenger car population in these 5 countries. However, less than 20% of those are BEVs. That's predicted in 2040. Out of a projected 1.2 billion vehicles in 2040, approximately 1 billion still have an internal combustion engine. Of the 200 million BEVs in 2040, almost half are in China, which has no petroleum resources and a relatively limited investment in internal combustion engine technology and manufacturing. These projections by respected sources are not being looked at properly. The internal combustion engine is far from dead, and we haven't even started talking about heavy-duty diesel transport. Even from an environmental standpoint, the internal combustion engine, particularly a hybrid EV with an ICE, makes a lot of environmental sense. The technology for BEVs is still in its infancy, and the manufacturing and environmental impact of battery production, not to mention coal electricity production, means that the BEV isn't going to replace the ICE and hybrid soon. It will happen, not soon. If you'd like to learn more about hybrids versus BEVs, this TED Talk is very informative. Andy Rich of Infinium shared it. I'm not going to play it, but if you want to understand how BEVs' time has not come, but will, and hybrids make a lot of sense environmentally, check it out. Some good information. So where does this leave the auto manufacturers? They're in a terrible bind. Given the politics in their home markets, they have to invest in electric vehicles. Some are very cagey. Volvo will make no cars without electric motors, they say. All EVs, not all BEVs. Some are heavily investing. GM and VW have committed billions to EVs. Development dollars are flowing to EVs, including ICE-containing hybrids. They have a tough choice to make. How many EVs will they actually sell? How far should they move away from the internal combustion engine? They have major investments now, and I expect a reckoning. As I look to the pictures here, the BEV market faces many challenges. The high end saturates and the low end market slowly grows. If you look at that Porsche, it's a real nice vehicle. It costs a lot of money. And there's a lot of manufacturers that are trying to enter that market because they can make money today on that, on those high end BEVs. The challenge is the low end of the BEV market. And I jokingly have a picture of golf carts from the Villages. It's a retirement community in Florida. But frankly, the low end of the market's going to be where they're going to have to make progress. And they're not going to be making a lot of money there. And there's not a lot of demand for people, from many consumers for this type of low-end expensive vehicle. However, virtue signaling politicians issuing aspirational proclamations will have to confront customer choices and the possible need to penalize internal combustion engine consumers. What do I mean? Some of these guys that are sitting there saying, oh, we're going to get rid of these engines, we're going to get rid of these engines, are going to have to either raise the price of fuel or take away subsidies or offer more subsidies for engines that people don't necessarily want to buy. In markets like Brazil, sustainability will be held on by biofuels, which will play a major role with internal combustion engines sustainability. In Brazil, of course, ethanol concentrations of up to 100% already power many vehicles, in fact, most. Flex fuel vehicles are very common. People move between fuels based on the price of the different fuels every day. OEMs recognize the different lubrication requirements, and some have special specifications for these high ethanol markets. And you look to heavy duty, the heavy duty market's going to stay with the internal combustion engine for decades. You're going to see a lot of shift on city buses, light duty delivery, local transport. They can adopt BEVs because routes are short and they can recharge overnight. A lot of municipalities and companies, municipalities, especially on buses, companies with their delivery, want to show their environmental credentials. They will also adopt alternative fleets readily. But heavy-duty fleets seeking legitimate green credentials will adopt renewable fuels such as biodiesel and renewable diesel to reduce greenhouse gas emissions up to 80%. Engine oils, in summary, are not a technical backwater doomed to fade away. Engine size, control schemes, and technology are going to have to change significantly. Internal combustion engines in 2050 are not going to be using GF6. Technical demand for low viscosity, low volatility oils is going to continue to grow. Furthermore, sustainability is possible with internal combustion motor oils. Engine oils are huge players in vehicle efficiency. People don't like to recognize this, but the low viscosity engine oils measurably improve real-world engine friction loss. If you have less fuel needed to move the same amount of mass, you've saved energy. You produce less greenhouse gas emissions per distance traveled. Further, low volatility and highly paraffinic base oils enable longer drain intervals, so you produce less waste. OEMs have already been pushing for this. They're under regulatory pressure and they recognize this and push for more of these tangible benefits. Still, the OEMs and the consumers would like to have a truly sustainably sourced base stock and lubricant. So how do you do that? Well, there's three basic pathways to sustainable base stocks. The first is to use re-refined used motor oils. The second is carbon credit offsets. And the third is renewable base oils. Renewable base oils, we'll talk about in a minute. They can be biogenically sourced, meaning they pull carbon out of the atmosphere, or they can be waste stream generated through waste plastic recycling. So re-refined base stocks are gaining interest. Why? Re-refining, it takes a stream of waste stream and reinserts it into the virgin base stock pool. The quality of the resulting base stock is really a function of the collection of what you got and contamination control. Today, what you've got is getting better and better. Used motor oil waste has a much better viscosity and VI profile than it has in the past. And the reason for that is that we're using lower viscosity engine oils in the field and a lot more group 2 and group 3 content. Further, you can take those base stocks, those re-refined base stocks, and you can hydrotreat them and distill them to improve the base stock quality. That makes it suitable for most 5W and even some 0W specifications. I think you're going to see a lot of motion here. Some major oil marketers are giving re-refined oils serious consideration. I would comment as I leave this that Brazil, of course, has some of the best re-refining numbers in the world. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this also becoming a major issue in Brazil. Another approach is carbon credit offsets. Many major industries have tried to improve their environmental image by creating offset programs to compensate for CO2 equivalents created in their operations. Several airlines encourage customers to pay for CO2 offsets when they buy their flights. Many major oil marketers, a couple of major oil marketers have declared their products to be carbon neutral due to offsets. The fact of the matter is offsets don't actually change the amount of greenhouse gas produced in making a product. Furthermore, questions arise about the durability of the offset versus the carbon reintroduced into the biosphere. Will the trees that you plant offset the carbon that you brought back for millions of years from underground? There is another path, and that's renewable base oils. Plants and animals remove carbon dioxide from the biosphere and capture them in the form of triglycerides. These triglycerides have many uses as cooking oils, cosmetics, and other consumer products. Some of these triglycerides quickly become waste streams themselves from other processes. Waste or virgin plant and animal oils can be converted into hydrocarbons. An example is renewable diesel, such as NESTE, which is a 100% drop-in for fossil diesel with 80% less greenhouse gas footprint. There are also technologies in commercial operation today to manufacture renewable base oils from these same feedstocks. An example of this is Novi LLC with manufacturing in Houston, Texas. They've commercialized a process to create an extremely low volatility, high VI base stock made entirely from renewable components. To kind of illustrate what can be done with this, I'm going to talk about something NESTE is working on. This is not meant to be a sales job, but rather a demonstration of the journey to zero. A low carbon footprint, renewable and sustainable base stock. If you use a life cycle analysis where you look at all the processes that are operated and the carbon put into making something, you can come up with a carbon footprint for selected key base oils. For example, PAO has a very high footprint, 1.9 or so kilograms CO2 equivalent per kilogram of base oil. Group 3 is very high as well, around 1.0, but roughly half of PAO. If you combine a group 3 with those renewable molecules I just talked about, you can create a commercial high performance group 3 base stock that is carbon neutral. We're talking a group 3 plus carbon neutral base stock. You make sure you source those in accordance with practices to make sure you're sustainably sourcing them. But this new base stock enables blenders to make low carbon and reduced carbon claims without relying on carbon credits. So I'm not going to spend much time on this slide because what I want to emphasize is what is possible and demonstrated here. It is possible to manufacture a carbon neutral group 3 plus base stock with excellent performance. The NOAC evaporation is category leading because the renewable molecule distribution is so tight. The CCS is comparable or better to the most other high VI solutions, and it's carbon neutral without offsets. So as you look at that table there, and it's comparing other Group 3 pluses, GTL and PAO, you see a tremendously low NOAC and competitive CCS with renewable content. That's pretty important. So in summary, global base stock supplies are very limited due to the coronavirus impacts on fuel demand patterns, which are not going to ease until at least 2022. Environmental factors, global base stock supply has been further impacted due to the ongoing large-scale natural and man-made events. The internal combustion engine, I will contend, is going to remain the dominant motive force through 2050, despite virtue signaling politicians. New motor oils are needed. This is an important message that I hope you did capture from this discussion, because as we hear more and more about EVs, keep in mind that you need to talk about battery electric vehicles and vehicles that do not include an internal combustion engine to really understand the penetration rates. Renewable feedstocks, there is a quest for truly renewable base stocks. It's going to focus on renewable feedstocks and re-refining. And high-performing Group 3 plus carbon neutral base stocks can be made to bring real benefits to OEMs, consumers, and blenders. With that, I'm finished. NESTE appreciates the opportunity to talk. We do like to share our insights regarding sustainability and renewability. And that's it.